All right, kiddos, glad you're back with Biology Scope. So, we are going to get into our introduction of evolution. So, here's some early ideas that we had about evolution. Many scientists have long pondered the diversity of life on Earth. And how did the millions and millions of different organisms of so many shapes and sizes come to occupy so many habitats on Earth? So the term diversity refers to the variety of living things that inhabit our planet. Let me move this over here. Sorry about that, guys. Now, these questions have been asked for centuries by many evolutionary biologists, and they are still being asked today. So, why do these organisms live where they do? How did these organisms arise? Which organisms are related to one another? What adaptations allow an organism to live in a particular place? These have been asked for many, many centuries. And how do organisms change over time? Let's talk about the principles of evolution. So, in this unit, we will be discussing these overall principles of evolution. So, the theory of evolution is the organizing principle of life science. The millions of different species of plants, animals, and microorganisms that live on Earth today are all related by descent from common ancestors, which is evolution's claim. And the great diversity of organisms is the result of more than 3.8 billion years of evolution that has filled every available niche with life forms. Now, I've got a video linked here. If you want to watch it, that's up to you. Now, where did life begin? Life began with endosymbiotic theory. So, this proposed that the organelles of eukaryotic cells were once prokaryotic cells that have been engulfed by a larger prokaryotic cell. And the evidence of this is going to be found in the mitochondria and chloroplast because they reproduce like bacteria. So the takeaway from this is that life started pretty simple and it became more complex over time. Now, evolution is a change in the inherited characteristics of a group of organisms over generations. So, evolutionary theory is then the collection of scientific facts, observations, and hypotheses that attempt to explain the diversity of life on Earth. So, modern scientists define evolution as a heritable change in the characteristics within a population from one generation to the next. Now, much of today's understanding of evolution is based on Charles Darwin's work in the 1800s. However, Darwin did not come up with the idea of evolution himself. Many other scientists actually contributed important information and ideas to the study of evolution. So we also have Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He was a French naturalist who put forward his own theory for how evolution works. So he proposed that organisms inherited changes caused by the use or disuse in its parents. So, for example, if a parent giraffe stretches its neck to get at the leaves on tall trees, its descendants are born with longer necks. And so giraffes evolve over generations to have long necks. While this theory has subsequently been disproven, aspects of his idea still float around today. So, this is kind of what he thought. He thought that the original giraffe had a short neck, but it kept stretching its neck to reach the leaves higher up on the tree over time, and it kept stretching and stretching and stretching until the neck became as long as it is today. Now, we also have Alfred Russel Wallace, which was another British naturalist and was a co discoverer of the theory of evolution. Now, perhaps Wallace's greatest contribution to the theory of natural selection was simply to ask, why do we find this animal in this place? So he realized that just as animals are shaped by where they live, regions can also be defined by the animals that live there. Now, in 1831, English naturalist Charles Darwin completed his college studies and joined the crew of the HMS Beagle for a 5-year trip around the world. So, this trip would become one of the most important voyages in the history of science. On this voyage, Darwin would make observations and collect evidence that would lead him to propose his theory of evolution about the way that life changes over time. My computer got stuck. Here we go. Now, during his voyage, Darwin made many observations. For example, many of the plants and animals he observed were well suited to the environment in which they were living. He noted that adaptations seen in desert organisms would not be seen in organisms living in a rainforest. So, adaptations are characteristics of organisms that enhance their survival and reproduction in specific environments. So, here on the left, we have desert plants that have adapted their roots and their stems and leaves to store more water and decrease its loss, since deserts don't see very much rainfall. Well, on the right, we see that many trees in the tropical rainforest are found in soil with poor nutrient content. So, these roots pictured here grow only for short distances below the ground to tap nutrients from the thin layer of topsoil where most of the nutrients are concentrated. Now, one key observation that Darwin made was the variation of life. Variation is differences in traits among organisms. So the classic example is the variation of beaks in finches, which are birds that are found in the Galapagos Islands. Now, why do you think these finches would have different beaks? So you can see we've got 4 different beak types here. So number 1 eats seeds. Number 1 will eat nuts. Number 2 will eat seeds. Number 3 eats insects. And number 4 digs in moss for insects. Now, Darwin collected many fossils over the course of his voyage. Fossils are the preserved remains of an ancient organism. Now, some of the fossils resembled organisms that were still alive, while others were unlike any creature he had ever seen. Darwin found fossils of both organisms that no longer exist, such as giant sloths, and organisms that resemble living species. This indicates that organisms can go extinct and that existing species are likely related to ancient species. Now, he also found fossils of marine organisms in mountains, meaning that a geological change has occurred. Darwin also noted the similarities and differences among many different organisms, and he became convinced that organisms had changed over time. Now, Darwin noted that the organisms found on each island of the Galapagos Islands had special adaptations that allowed them to survive only on that island. So here we have a couple tortoises that can be found in the Galapagos Islands. So this tortoise on the top, for example, they have a shell that rises up in the front just like a saddle. While this tortoise on the other end has more of a dome-shaped shell. And And I will leave that up to your interpretation of why these two different tortoises would need to have different shaped shells based on the island that they live on.